all for being here. And because this is being recorded, others may check it out later. And the three congregations that we invited to kind of lead off are Nativity and Pax and St. Benedict's Table. So I thought let's just start with the first question that I sent you all, because what really stood out for us in thinking of each of you is that worship is really a core part of who you are. And that in the pandemic has been really difficult to live into. And it's not just a pandemic question, but it's vocationally interesting. What happens when part of your core identity, when the context just shifts out from underneath you? Like, how do you respond to that? So first of all, how is worship a core part of your congregation's calling? And then on the other side, how does worship support your callings in the world? Those two sides of that. So who would like to start us off?
I can.
Thank you, Rachel. I was about to call on you anyway. So that was good.
So St. Benedict's is an Anglican and Episcopal church. We've existed for about 15 years. And Jamie Howison, who's one of my other colleagues on this project, founded the church. So in terms of vocation, I think it's interesting, like we're 15, and so we're starting to go, who do we want to be when we grow up? And one of the things we've realized is our strengths are, in some ways, are our founder's strengths. So liturgy is his strength, and therefore it is one of our strengths. And that's like, not everyone has every gift, right? But that's just like a piece of ours. Like, we were founded by someone who cares deeply about liturgy and worship, and that impacts us. We also rent space in another church's building, which impacts us. And from the very beginning, and meet on Sunday nights. So from the very beginning, we've drawn a lot of folks who maybe are pastors and work at a church in the morning and then come and join us in the evening, or for other reasons, the evening is good. And there was a decision made early on to celebrate that and not say, you got to be part of one congregation, but to say, you're welcome here. You're welcome to be part, like this can be your second church home. And then also not to worry too much about trying to get everyone to be involved in St. Benedict's branded programs. Mm. So this is how I came to the church. To simplify things, I was the ED of a small charity, and I was busy, but I could still come and worship and nobody made me feel guilty about it. And so those things have just kind of shaped who we are. People are coming to engage and worship, and that's the primary thing folks are looking for. And that's the primary thing we focus on, while saying we love we want to celebrate the work you're doing. We don't need to brand it or incorporate it into what we're doing, because we don't need to hold it that tightly.
So on the flip side, I hear a piece of an answer to how does worship support your callings in the world. I hear that as it affects the people who come. Like, it really supports their callings, their individual callings in the world. Mm-hmm. Is there a way that it affects the calling of the community of St. Benedict's Table?
Well, like in a couple ways, one thing is, so we are called St. Benedict's Table. Up until COVID, like the primary focus of worship was to lead folks to the Eucharistic table. And then we would talk about how we gathered at all these, like we use so much table language, and table was essential. And it's an open table, like really open. I've given Eucharist to, folks wearing turbans, and it's open. And I found personally, because I was a parishioner before I became a priest and was hired by the church, I was a member there. So I found for myself the weekly experience of being at an open table shifted my understanding of my world and my role and my personal vocation. And I've seen that happen time and time again in different ways for different people. And when we make choices and decisions, that experience of gathering at the table and who is welcome, it infuses everything else that we do, sometimes very intentionally, and sometimes it's just like the soup we swim in. We almost don't realize we're doing it.
So it's a kind of a moral space as well as the welcome has a moral dimension to it. That's what I'm saying. And that infuses people's work in the world. Yeah, really, really interesting. Does anyone feel like called to be next, or you want me to Nativity or Pox? Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Like Pox and like St. Benedict's Table, the Orthodox are very Eucharistic centered. So for us, the Eucharist, weekly Eucharist, is really, it's just so ingrained in who we are as a people. For example, I have a good friend of mine down the street who is Presbyterian. And we're talking about church life and worship, and he said he doesn't feel like he misses church because he has the Zoom, the prayers and the hymns and the sermon. I said, well, don't you miss being together? And he goes like, well, it's different for you because the bread and the wine are physicality of our worship. It's just part of who we are. And he goes, we don't have that so often. I mean, we have Eucharist, Advent and Thanksgiving. But it was interesting hearing that from my friend Dave because, so anyway, for us, it was a hard season. I mean, we went on lockdown for a month in North Carolina because it was so severe. Our county is the highest county of virus rates in the state, so it's very high. Now the bishop did give us, this is very interesting, he gave me permission, well, all the priests permission, either to have worship during the virus, through the Easter season, through Pentecost, with only 5 people, with the same people. Okay, that was one option, the same 5 people, doesn't matter who it is, but 5 people. You don't want people coming in and going during the virus in the beginning, or shut down totally and don't have any service. And I thought to myself, well, if I have the same 5 people, what about the other 80 people who can't come regularly? Yes, we could do live stream. Yes, people could see the church, but I thought, you know what? I don't think it's really appropriate. And I'm really strong on community. And all I'm getting, I'm more and more, I get tired of the clericalism in the church. And I realized without knowing it, that's the clerical attitude of having worship without the rest of the community. So I said, we're shutting down. And I have not had, only recently, 2 weeks ago, had communion because we shut down the whole church until 2 weeks ago. We started opening up our services now. But you know what? Because we're so Eucharistic centered and we're so centrally on a Sunday morning, what has been flourishing for us is our educational component. For example, teaching and scripture is basic for us as well, like both Pox and St. Ben's Table. So I've done a weekly recording beginning in the spring with John's Gospel that we read, and I'm continuing now with Matthew in the summer. So, and this gives me time to do it on Zoom. I record it. I'm more comfortable. I don't feel rushed like on Sunday. It's crazy with kids and people and coffee hour. So the teaching aspect has really flourished, I think. And we'll continue with Luke's Gospel in the fall, which we read our lectionary. And we had a series of guest speakers that had come in to give us some other food and nourishment. So while we put the worship aside away for a while, we, I think, highlighted the scripture and our kind of education component. I don't know what people think about it. I've not heard much from folks, but at least we're offering that right now. As far as my vocation goes, it's forced me to focus more on the pastoral care side because I'm not doing the worship regularly. I'm not preparing a sermon. I preach on Zoom, but I'm not, on Sunday, it's a little different. I'm not going to hospitals. I'm not doing weddings. I'm not doing, baptisms. So for me, it's been a lot of phone calls, email updates. So it's more of for me, it's more of a pastoral care focus right now. And we're opening up slowly, but it's very small because our sanctuary is so small. So that's where we are now.
You make me think, partly because you used the word nourishment when you were talking about people making educational offerings. I thought that was an interesting word to use. A friend of mine asked me recently, he's an Episcopal priest, he said, are you hearing people talk more about the sacramentality of the word? And it sounds as though you all are discovering the sacramentality of of learning, of gathering around the word for learning, and also of pastoral care. Like, are you hearing any language around that?
For myself, I could speak on my own my devotions. I mean, I've deepened my scripture reading. I mean, I always read scripture regularly, but for my prayer life, I doubled down on my psalm reading for myself. And I know I've grown in the past 5 months. I definitely have grown. I mean, after 20 years, I'm still growing. But and in the parish, again, I'm not getting much feedback, but at least I'm doing recordings regularly. So they have, at least probably now, 5 months worth of scripture. So if later on they go back to it, they can. But I'm providing it for people, Jane. If they want it, they take it. If not, I can't help it. It's frustrating because I get little feedback. I have no clue if it's good, bad. They don't care. People don't respond. It's just strange. It's also strange too because when you're meeting together as a body on Sunday, there's more sharing, personal, one-on-one, and I don't get any of that. So it's just hard.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Well, and something to add to that too is we were not a community that was active virtually or socially, like social media wise. We don't have an Instagram account. We don't do Facebook. So it was a shock to the system. Like as a parishioner, I felt like something was severed, right? When I couldn't go back, because that was just the physicality and that being in the liturgy means so much to me. And so we had a learning curve, I'd say, on or maybe an adoption curve, not really a learning curve, because Zoom, you don't need a learning curve. So we're still there too. So it's really more, as Father Bill says, make it available and make people aware. And I'm grateful that it's recorded, because I know personally also regarding scripture readings, I am less rushed because my life has had to slow down because of so many different changes with outreach things I did, or very physically active within the church and so on. So when I'm taking that time, I'm more present. So I'm grateful for that.
Thank you. This is really, really interesting in terms of your own shifting vocations. Jane, let's get our third principal voice in here. Jane, speaking from Pox.
Yeah, so very, well, actually, so we shut down, I think it was March 17th, which was a Tuesday, Wednesday. And, we had a vision in what is now our current fiscal year to start live streams, but we somehow, with really good staff, had live stream that first weekend. Very clunky, and clunky for those doing this for the first time and people tuning in and all that. So, so that was, and we've done it since, and we will do it, in the future, despite what the pandemic, when it ends and all that, just because we have a lot of care centers in the area that will want to, tune in. So we live stream it on Saturday night and record it, and then it's on our website for about a week or so until the next one. So so we've been doing that, but just with the people there that were, one cantor, one lector, Mike, the person who was doing the live stream, and that was about it, so nobody else from outside. So then it got to be about, I think it was May, then we started a parking lot mass. And so people would still tune in, to the live stream, but some, we thought we could do this, especially since the weather was getting nicer, to do a parking lot mass. So we got FM radio station, for people to tune in. And we probably had 60 to 70 cars, and then people could come and receive communion. And at the end, so we had to put a lot of the protocols, in place, which of course were different than what we were used to. So it has been an adjustment for everybody. What happened then, actually, what are we in August? Everything kind of comes together. I think it was in July. So first of all, we had a protocol video that we made for everybody when we were ready to go to 100 people at one mass. So right now, basically, we're doing 3, masses: live stream, 9 o'clock on Sunday, and then a noon parking lot. But the 9 o'clock, when we started opening that, I think that was the end of June, then we had a video that we made that we created about all our protocol with face masks and when we received communion and distance and sanitizing and all that. So we thought it through really well. I thought, we did. So that was posted on our website. And somehow, this is where it gets creepy. And then this is also where it was appalling, to me, because we heard all the parishioners thought, thank you, this is great, but we had communion at the end of Mass, but we also had, for the safety of everybody, we put communion in a little plastic wax thing, which is not what we do normally, but we don't ever, this is our first pandemic. And it was unbelievable, the people who from across the country and even across the world who saw this video and took us to task for how we were creating this different way of receiving communion. And so we actually had to call the police because there was physical harm threatened against, staff in the building. So it got to be really crazy, really, really crazy. So I feel the vocation of all of this, of the calling of kindness and love and what the Eucharist is all about really got skewed very quickly. So anyway, we undid that. The bishop called us up and said, stop it, because he was getting pressure and that. So I say all that. I wasn't actually going to say all that, but I'm trying to put it in the context of, how we are, to each other, and especially how we are to the community. The community still loves gathering, whether they are virtual or the few. And we have 100 as a maximum. Our space could take more, but we really wanted to put in kind of an arbitrary number out there for 100 people to join us. We've never met that number. We have about 10,000 members. We've never gone even up to 100 because this is an RSVP, so we can trace and all that and be prepared for who's coming. And we've never gotten to that number. So that is the kind of the query that I'm thinking of. So what happens after the pandemic? How will people want to continue to gather, whether it's virtually or, which we will continue to do that, like I said, or on site, and it'll take some time. So we're in fact, we have a meeting tomorrow, Mike and I and the 2 liturgists have a meeting tomorrow to figure out, in Minnesota winters, we can't do this parking lot mass, forever. So as we get to the fall, how will we respond? So really, our call was really to respond to kind of the twists and turns, not only of the pandemic, but also what are the community needs. And, beyond our Sunday liturgy, I had asked our justice coordinator, who also serves a bit in liturgy, to create a prayer after George Floyd's murder. So we did that again virtually, but that was just like a quick, that week after. But then we've had a couple of people, 5 or 6 people from the parish who have created then a prayer service each month. Right now it's called A Time to Lament and Hope, so kind of naming not only our sorrow of this loss of life with the pandemic, but also with racism. And, you know, so that has been a surprise, a wonderful surprise that's been posted. That is more, you know, virtual. It's then posted on our website. And it's just a beautiful connection of word and music and prayer. And yeah, so that's, again, I don't do it. I've, you know, just encourage it. But it's just been, that's been a wonderful piece of getting the community, again, gathered in prayer. So our call has really been to be nimble, you know, and kind of think on our feet and read the community, read what the gifts and talents are and how can they be utilized in this just very different way.
That is a fascinating story. I'm really glad this is being recorded, because there's going to be a time in the future where people will say, what was it like? And someone can listen to that, and that will tell a lot of it. I think it's really interesting for a Eucharistically centered community to find the depth of prayer, and like that, this again, like a sacramental connection between prayer and the needs of the community around you. Like that language, like the way Bill like went to the word nourish, like I'm thinking there's a hunger here that you are addressing with prayer, a hunger to bring our faith to bear on the world, and you're doing that with prayer, and it's really fascinating. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Anyone who's not, you know, not one of those three who would like to either ask something or just say something about what's going on in your own congregation, because every church to some extent has worship as a really central piece of it.
Well, I guess I just was thinking at Holy Trinity in Minneapolis, when I would go down and volunteer. We are ending our distribution this Friday. Other entities are going to be taking over, which is good. But the times when I was down there volunteering and seeing all the people gathered, it sort of felt like worship to me. It sort of felt like we were, you know, kind of going through almost the structure of a service with people gathering and being welcomed, the people who are coming to get support, and those of us who are working, you know, welcoming them and being kind and offering support and help. And, you know, then I can remember one time I was part of a little chain of people sending bags of supplies up, and it was almost like, you know, kind of doing the bread and the wine. It was being passed on to those in need. And that was a really powerful moment for me when I was there and had that thought, and you know, felt like Holy Trinity. We have always been a church with social justice being very high and community service being kind of one of our hallmarks, or just, you know, one of the strong timbers that we lean on. And I was really proud of my church and my community in the way that we just kind of created a new service.
Thank you so much. I think you're giving voice to that really important way in which Eucharist and other ways in which we live the body of Christ, like they really, I'm putting my hands on top of, like they're like that, right? They belong together. And the fact that you saw the Eucharistic side of what you were doing in your neighborhood, that lends an honor to the neighborhood work, but the neighborhood work also uncovers a depth that's in the Eucharist, right? So they're
Mhm.
talking back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else before I move to, we've kind of answered the second question, which has to do with the pandemic. I am interested in whether there's anything going on in your current patterns of worship that you feel are reshaping, refining or altering the call for your congregation. Like, are there some things happening now that are going to change you forever in some ways that you'll choose? I see you nodding, Rachel. Is that, are you just taking it in, or?
No, well, yeah, I'm like, yes. So I didn't really say what we did for the pandemic. So just very briefly,
Yeah.
Our bishop suspended in-person worship in March. And now there's a process if you want to go back. But my congregation, like, we haven't had a Eucharist service since early March then. So I haven't received Eucharist since early March. Nobody, if they were only coming to our church, has. Like, maybe they've gone somewhere else. And we did two things right away. One is we started live streaming our Sunday service and just made it a service of like a liturgy of the word, and there's no Eucharistic component. And we also started doing evening prayer at 5 p.m. every day as a live stream. Initially with me doing it 6 days a week, which was a lot. And now there's a little team helping me with that. So one thing I think that will change permanently is we've often spoken to folks about the importance of daily prayer in the office. We've found interesting, I think, ways of sort of encouraging them to do it, right down to bringing groups intentionally to Collegeville so they could see monastic practice. But when we've ever thought about doing it on, like, in person, it just instantly becomes too impractical. Like, everyone trying to drive there every day, who's going to do that? It's so much work. And we're like, we have discovered that the way you do that is you use the live streaming, and it makes it possible. And there's like a very committed chunk of people who come every day to almost every day to pray. So it's like, there was an abstract value of the office and daily prayer are important, and it's sunk deeper. For those of you who've been following the stuff we've been doing with the project, we've talked about as a congregation, we have this digital commons, and it's not just the people who show up on Sunday, but that is becoming more real or deeper as people come to the live stream who probably could never come on Sunday. They don't live here. And it's not like it's a huge ton of folks, but you'll periodically, when I check through the comments, we use Facebook, when I check through the comments after, it'll be like, hello from Texas, or folks who moved away and are now on the west coast of Canada, but they're coming back to church. Like, those things are all shifting. I'm asking questions around, to put it kind of in a blunt way, like, how have we failed by telling people Sunday worship is important, and kind of like, we have focused on making that muscle really beautiful and strong, and we forgot all the other muscles. God actually wants to meet you in every minute of the day. And so how can we beef up not just paying lip service to that, but pointing out things like daily prayer, or when you're at a protest, or when you're doing something and it feels like church, or it feels like God, it is. And how can we help push our language and folks' understanding around those kinds of things? So, and then I've been doing some writing on my own website to try to also be a bit of an evangelist for online as a valid way of connecting, which is not actually an opinion I held that strongly pre-pandemic. So I see these things shifting and moving.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Bill or Anne or Jane?
The question, Jane, about what's going to happen in the future, is that?
Well, is this changing you and the worship part of your calling in ways that, so that you won't go back to just being the way you were afterwards? You might not have an answer, but
I saw the questions that you included. I just honestly don't have a thought. I mean, I do think we did have this is our third week open. So we had, during the whole pandemic, I did do a very short service with a scripture and sermon from my office every week. So we did have worship, but it wasn't Eucharistic worship. I could see having the online, keep on doing that. However, such a big part of our worship is experiential, participatory. I'm not quite sure how many people will avail themselves of that, except for those maybe perhaps who are homebound or whatever, which is important. I see it has a role, but I think the in-person worship is essential. Other than that, I honestly don't know. There's so much going on. My mind is distracted as far as like looking ahead. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I actually love that. I think that's like vocationally so important. Someone had to say that sometime today. I don't know at all.
Ask me tomorrow, right?
Yeah. I'll not know something else tomorrow.
I think something that might hopefully change is, as God willing, we're all back together for liturgy and where we all want to be, is that we're geographically dispersed, that we're a small community, and then our parishioners will drive anywhere from 20 to 50 minutes one way to get to church. And we try to pack everything in to Saturday or Sunday when everybody's there. So as the adoption grows and we become more proficient in activities like adult education, I would love to see that continue, so that we're not just exhausting people, right? So I hope we can leverage the technology and the willingness to connect remotely and integrate it in with our experience as a community.
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting. And yeah, that wouldn't have happened without this. I was thinking too about something Bill was saying. Like, I think it is true that for some communities, going online just is no substitute. Like, so, and I think it's really important that within our group, we have people who are in different enough parts of the church that sacramentality is different across these different areas. And so reaching sort of the limit point on that, it's important to recognize. So I can see like there's parts of your church's life that can move online, and there's some parts that they simply cannot go online.
One thing I must say, I mean, thinking about it again, I'm less tired. I mean, on Sunday, it would be exhausting, but I do think, for example, the teaching part, the Bible studies, the meetings, there's less commuting time, there's no rush hour traffic. So a lot of that stuff can be online, but for us, I think the Sunday is just being there together is so essential. Mm-hmm. But honestly, I love streaming from my office doing Bible studies. Great. I feel more I feel more energized. I don't feel so tired and cranky.
Yeah, because you're living into the heart of that vocation, not all the parts that sap your energy, just that pure love of the teaching and learning. And yeah, I love that. Jane, are there things that you think POX will keep doing now?
Yeah, I think, well, we're going to continue to do the live stream, beyond the pandemic. But what has been surprising, I guess for me, is pre-pandemic, we would have our masses, we would have depending upon what time the mass was, either a meal or at least, coffee after the mass. And that was really when the community gathered to talk. They gathered to pray, and then they would gather to talk. And I have found out more recently that kind of the extension of the Eucharist is how people have used then, because, well, people at the, like say coffee would kind of gravitate to each other and, kind of form that community, or they would be the ones to provide the hospitality of service. So they continue to meet after, after the 9 o'clock mass, whether they attend or whether they watch it, at 9 o'clock, because it's been taped the night before. So there are some groups that continue to meet without us, we just don't get in the way. I mean, but it's just nice to know that happens. Again, now because it's still, summer and into the fall, people do gather outside throughout the week just to have conversations. So, on Sunday, it seems to be by Zoom, but they will gather, and, they have to keep their distance. They know that. And they do, but we have some really nice space for that to happen with a grotto and or a shrine area to St. Francis and a labyrinth area. And, so there are a lot of outdoor spaces that people I've found have gathered. So what we're doing in the sense of the refining or looking at, again, worship and then beyond, this fall, and this was a dream about a year ago, in which the Worship Council wanted to create a retreat, especially for liturgical ministers, lectors, Eucharistic ministers, greeters, altar servers, and so that was kind of more to help or to give them nuggets so they can in turn be enriched and grow. So that was pre-pandemic. And then as the pandemic came, the conversation among the group of planners was, well, we're really missing a huge portion of the people who are nourished. And that is the assembly. So so it's an all parish virtual retreat. We'll try it. It's in September. And, but really a focus on the assembly as really being, just as vital as any of the other more visible liturgical ministers. And so that'll be an interesting way to look at that, and we'll see what happens then, after. So it's a kind of that, the I don't know, but I'm proud of the group that has put this retreat together, and I've done a lot of work, but to include the assembly as a very specific area of ministry as we minister to to each other, whether it's in in conversation and coffee after mass, or in other ways of gathering, or being as then how they are living their call in the world. So again, that'll be another kind of we'll see what the impact of that is, but it'll be fun to kind of watch that happen.
Absolutely. It's fascinating that this emphasis on the assembly would come up at a time when people can't assemble.
Yes.
But I mean, it makes a weird kind of sense, but you have to have been through this to understand why that would make so much sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, because we have found that we have members joining from all around,
Right.
around the, not just joining us for liturgy, because we can see the little dots on the map each time we pray together for the live stream, but so we see where people are joining us from. But we've had people across the nation now become members because they feel that they can at least join us for this. And so it's just, I don't know, it's just very interesting. I never in my wildest dreams would have thought to have to think so differently, and I'm so glad in that way. I mean, if we had to have this this horrible pandemic, at least there are some things that we can learn from, about human beings, and how we can still interact with each other. So. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. That's a really great lead in, I think, to the last question, which is, what are you learning about God in this time? So what's God been up to?
One thing, Jane, I was thinking a lot about is the Old Testament story, the Exodus, of the daily feeding of the manna and not planning too far ahead. Anne will vouch, I'm a big planner. I love to plan. I want to plan. I have 2 teenage daughters. I want to plan both their weddings. Like, I love to plan things. I like to organize. And anyway, from my research part of my brain that this talent that I have, but it's really forced me as a pastor to really, I can't even plan next week. I mean, honestly, I have no idea if our county if we have a spike, we'll go lockdown again. I mean, it's crazy. So it's really forced me as a person and as a pastor to really just focus on the day, our daily bread, our daily needs, period, and not really think too far in advance. And for example, our treasurer emailed me recently about, planning our 2021 budget. I was like, hey, it's only August. I can't even think. But that's part of, I think, as pastors, maybe Rachel could agree, maybe not, but we're always thinking ahead, like next season, stewardship drive, Advent lecture series. I had a laugh. A friend of mine was asking me about Christmas services, of what I was thinking about. I said, are you kidding me? I can't think about that yet. Christmas services. But for me, 2 things about the Exodus story is the daily needs, but also the total disruption of life. Because in Egypt, the slaves, the Israelites, they had security. They had their jobs, they had their families, they had their homes, they had their food, they had their routine. But when they left Egypt, I mean, it's really clear in Exodus, for me at least, all that was disrupted. They had nothing to rely on. They had no work, they had no homes, they had no connections anymore. So it's made me rely more on God, really, and have the faith, because it's disrupted everything. It's disrupted my domestic life. It's disrupted our congregational life, my friendships, as not just me, but
Right.
I'm sure you could vouch that too.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 lessons I've learned about that, about really trusting God and just not planning too far in advance, because I have to laugh. One last thing. The last thing we did as a parish council was I led a planning retreat, a 5-year planning retreat in January. That's all that work we did, prepare for that. I thought, what a joke that was. I mean, like 10-page document, and oh my Lord, it was 5 years.
Yeah.
Who's kidding whom,
Oh, the things we used to keep ourselves busy with.
I mean, forget that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll shut up.
Wow.
Well,
Thank you so much. I just couldn't have been said better. Rachel, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Bill, I agree, like, about the thinking ahead and planning. Jamie and I planned this year's Holy Week 4 times, because we had there isn't a pandemic plan, and then different things kept shifting, and so that 1 week got redone 4 different times.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I think I'm learning is both to hold plans loosely. Like, my whole August is about organizing our fall and plans and what that's all going to look like, and they all have across the top subject to change without notice. but also to recognize some of the cost of that. In like, I am expending a lot of energy, and then sometimes I don't feel like I'm doing very much, but it's like, oh right, but I'm also living through a pandemic. I'm not just trying to help other people through it. I don't know what I'm doing either. And there is like, I get some really lovely encouragement from folks, but when you're preaching into Zoom or whatever, you don't get the feeling of the people around you. And like, one person writing in to say, I wish you'd done this differently, or I don't really like the online church, could be all I hear all week. Like, it's a different, and I have less capacity to handle the critique. So I'm noticing that, and also in pastors like who see me for spiritual direction and the like, that it's a hard time, because we're not doing things we ever thought we would do. Like, I didn't want to be a televangelist, and now I live stream 7 days a week. And we're not getting the reward, so to speak, of the feedback of the people, of the tangible. So a thing I am learning about God is in all of that, And it can't just be about the quality of my performance. Like I do have to, again, find like, but where am I going to connect with God individually? How do I know I'm doing the right thing? It can't just be based on human external feedback. And also that some of my ideas about who God was and what is acceptable and etc. Are shifting and changing and growing as I start to move towards saying things like, of course online worship is authentic, and maybe Eucharist is possible this way. And the January me was not having those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, just such a vocationally rich experience. Yeah. And I love the amount of attention and heart you all are bringing, like to observing what's going on with you. And Jane, any thoughts about how God is showing up in your processes at Pox?
Yeah, I guess I'll just speak for my personally in my role in the parish, because I don't want to talk or put words in the congregation's mouth. But really, amidst all the chaos, and it has been that in more surprising ways that I would have imagined. But, you know, in that, I really, in all of that, I really feel that God's presence as that constant, you know, as that reliable constant.
Mhm.
I don't know how else to say it, but yes, that God's presence is constant.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Tom or Stephen, I'm really interested in what you're resonating with or what's different where you are.
Yeah, excuse me. I've resonated with much of all of that. We we left the building mid-March, mid-Lent, because of the pandemic, and we moved our worship entirely online. We were just beginning conversations about how we might live stream the service, literally 2 weeks before all this started, thinking maybe in the next few months we should really investigate doing this. So don't wish for something like that. But we kind of took the ball and ran, and were able to move, you know, obviously not the Eucharistically, but hopefully devotionally, some readings and prayers and message, and get a lot of people involved. That's the feedback we got a lot. We had a lot of different people record pieces and then put it all together, and that's what we kind of created our worship experience to be. Because we are where we are, kind of in middle of, a lot of people will say middle of nowhere, but fairly less populated area. Our numbers have been pretty mild, and so come early mid-May, churches in our area started opening up again. We waited until June, but at the beginning of June, our congregation voted to start meeting again, whoever could. I don't get a vote, just FYI. But so anyway, long story short, we've been getting together, but it has been totally different because not everyone's there. It just felt different. We've been able to gather at the table and have Eucharist, but again, we're excluding a lot of people who don't want to be here, can't be here, but we are continuing the live stream thing. So it's been kind of a total upheaval of our worship life. It's really made us ask, what is the center of worship for us? What does that mean? And to a lot of people here, that's really made us think. But then, of course, there's always the people who think, I just want to get back to normal. Worship is what it was before all this. It's not going to be worship until it's back to that. So it's really helped us to think, well, hopefully will help us to think of how we listen to where we are and where God is calling us and how God is calling us. So that's been insightful for us. So it's been helpful to hear all the other churches that have been dealing with that as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And you just highlight again how the different context of each congregation creates a different set of questions and different ways for the congregation to experience this. And so thank you.
Something
Yeah.
just pop in. That's something I hear across the board, though, is the role of the real grief that is here and present in the congregations in a whole host of ways, but particularly around worship, and that even trying new things and the excitement that can bring. I'm also hearing just a real grief over how things are changing. And because I think ritual is so embedded in our bones, right? And the words that we've come to know and the consuming bread and wine and being together. I mean, that's such a crucial part of what it means to do liturgy. I'm glad to hear some of you drawing on lament, the practice of lament, and because the calling really is changing, and I just hear that grief and just kind of holding that. So it's not easy.
Thank you. Tom, insights from Spokane.
Thanks for the peer learning today and the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I'm listening today, and St. Mark's has been virtual since March 15th. We just stepped into it and have grown since that time. So I'm real proud of staff and the pastors. Audio has been a part of our services where members could download and listen, but the streaming virtual part, we just moved in that direction. We didn't have much choice, and it's working. We realize much of what you've taught us about callings being dynamic and not static, and certainly in this
unfortunately
life, yes, we are there. I think Bill used the word trust, and we are learning and growing and have actually made called to trust God's future our theme for project year 2. And so look forward to seeing where that takes us. I'm curious with Jan, were the parking lot services actually done virtual? I may have missed that in the conversation.
Yeah, no, the parking lot was done people would drive up, they'd stay in their cars, they had to have their windows closed, but they would turn on to the FM station that we got a transistor for, so we had it hooked up to our sound system, but it was outside, and Mike, and we have another priest who helps us out now. They would pray the mass, and then at the end, if people wanted to receive communion, then they would get out of their cars and come up to the outdoor. Unless it was too windy, then they would have to come in, but just by the entrance. So, but it was not live stream. It was,
okay. Thank you.
Live.
And Rachel, are you doing spiritual direction over virtual?
Yeah, I would call it my side hustle. Like, it's not a formal part of my role at the church, but I've been working as a spiritual director for about 8 years. And increasingly more and more folks want to do that via Zoom, even if they're in my own city.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thinking about that space that you've managed to create. So many thanks to all of you. I'm still unpacking the flight into the wilderness and all of that, and I'm thinking when Tom was talking, he said, like basically overnight we had to go virtual, like on March 14th or whatever the date was, just like that. And I thought that's so much part of the Passover story, right? Like you don't have time to Yeah, you got to eat standing up. You can't let your bread rise. You just got to go. And there's like so much in this, and all of you are talking about that. And the other thing is just what a shift this is for all of your individual vocations, that all those ways in which you got the energy of your vocation came from these relationships with other people. And you're carrying the weight of that grief while you're inventing a new way of being together and new ways to sort of tune yourselves to others in community. And that's really hard and beautiful. Well, thank you so much. What's coming up is in September, we have some teaching prepared by Kathleen on discernment, and you'll have some material that you can watch online if you want, and also it's shareable with your congregations. So there's some very short videos on discernment, and then we'll create a time or two to gather. And then in October, we're going to work on some preparation for the retreats. But this has been amazing. I just am full of love and admiration for the work that all of you are doing. Thank you. Anything else, Jessie, from your side?
No, yeah, thanks to all of you. And I'll be sending out an email next Monday or sometime next week that just gives some more information about where we're going for the fall and for the retreats and things like that. So otherwise, yeah, blessings to you all as things keep ramping up.
Thank you for arranging this.
Yes, thank
you.
you. Peace be with you.
Blessings.
Bye.